Hey guys, welcome back to a new session of Pilot Bootcamp. This is the course that takes you from idea to finished draft of a brand new pilot, either a half hour or 60-minute pilot in just 6 weeks. Let's get going. So we're in a staged channel, meaning you're going to have to request to speak if you want to be heard. You can do that by clicking the hand icon at the bottom of your Discord window. Looks like we have a hand raised already. Do we have a question from Kenneth? Go ahead. Or maybe he was just testing out the button. So the other thing is, when you are requested to speak, you'll have to see this accept invite button that shows up at the top. If you're on a mobile device, you might need to rotate the screen in order to be able to see that properly, but then you need to accept the invitation. Otherwise, you can use the text channel, which you can find by mousing over the classroom chat channel on the left-hand side of your Discord window, finding the small white word bubble that says Open Chats, and clicking that to display the text chat on the right of your screen. Okay, he says he's having some trouble accepting the invite, so I'm going to just continue with the next slide, but feel free to, whenever you're able to accept, I'll take your question. So we're part of Skilled Camp, which is this group of servers that are all dedicated to free classes, table reads, swaps, and writers groups, and just ways to learn and reach your life goals. We have some of our classes for free and for everybody, like this one. The week 1 classes are always going to be open to the public. And then the rest of the classes in a series will be for our supporting members, if you'd like to become a supporting member and join the boot camps and labs, etc., as well as many different events per month. You can sign up for membership at scriptcamp.net. Here you can sign up for unlimited membership, which includes access to every single thing that we do, every class, on every server, every event. And you can also look for yearly subscription down here, which is 40% off if you pay for the whole year, all up front. So again, that website is scriptcamp.net. Hopefully you guys will sign up for that. I'll tell you about the upcoming classes that we have in just a second. Looks like we got Kenneth, who is able to join the stage. So feel free to unmute and ask your question if you are able to do that, Kenneth.
Oh, sure thing. So, say I have an existing script, how would this fall into the first class?
So if you're looking to do a rewrite, is that what you're trying to do?
Basically.
Yes, okay. So it's not impossible to join the boot camps with a rewrite. A lot of people have done it in the past, but since we have also had like a separate rewriting program, we're not going to cover all the same steps and all the same ground. And it's basically not going to follow the same process that I would recommend following for a rewrite, which starts with things like getting notes, organizing those notes and deciding which ones you're going to take and which ones are important and which ones aren't, and making a plan and a revision guide and moving into it like in a really organized way. Those are steps that if you approach the feature bootcamp to do a rewrite, you're not going to have those steps, so you have to kind of do that other stuff on your own. So you have to like get the feedback beforehand, you have to figure out what you're going to use and what is your plan for the revision. So if that sounds like something you are used to doing and you're fine doing on your own, then it would make a lot of sense to go through a feature rewrite in this course. If that sounds like something you haven't done before or have a lot of questions about or aren't sure about, I would write something brand new for this class.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question. And just as a general tip for everyone, I would say this course is best for writing something brand new and exciting and something that'll just keep you interested in coming back for the 6 weeks of the classes. It doesn't have to be something and it shouldn't in fact be something you've worked on for a really long time. It shouldn't be some masterpiece of yours that has to be just right or has to, adequately tell the story of a people or of a place or of a time or to accomplish any kind of really high goals. Really, you should just look at this as I'm trying to write script after script after script to run those laps, so to speak, and just to improve your skills so that you can finish the thing and then move on to the next thing and keep doing that. And through that process, you will get much better than you would just rewriting one thing over and over again, which is not to say that we don't talk about rewriting on the server. We've done lots of rewriting focused stuff before, but this course in particular and all the boot camps that we have on right now are intended to help you write something new. So we have a bunch of new classes coming up. Here's a bunch of events you can see. These are all in Pacific Standard Time, so Los Angeles centered time. And these different colors are representing our different servers, with the light teal representing WordCamp, our novel writing server, where we've started a novel writing workshop recently. So that's Saturdays 12 to 2 for the rest of the month, you'll be able to find these novel outline workshops. We're also starting a novel writing boot camp at the end of the month, on October 14th. So you'll write a whole novel, kind of like this class, but a first draft of a brand new book in just 90 days. So that's starting October 14th at 2 p.m. You can see a bunch of other classes coming up here. We have live readings coming up in WordCamp as well. Feature Bootcamp, if you're looking to write a feature film, it's a little late, like week 3 of 8 is a little late to join. I recommend joining by the end of week 2 if you can, but that's running 10 to noon on ScriptCamp, which is our screenwriting focused server. We are introducing and adding for the first time language classes on LingoCamp. So Wednesday, October 1st, we're having our first ever introductory Spanish conversation class, taught by Victoria, one of our teachers here, and learn Spanish through interactive games, which is going to continue that series the following Wednesday, the 18th, also on LingoCamp. So you can see there's a couple other things on here, including animation workshop, sci-fi writers group, and weekly check-in groups. That's all going to be on WordCamp, and that's our second biggest and next fastest growing community, with heading towards 500 members now, whereas ScriptCamp has about 4,000, or heading up towards 4,000. But we're going to be adding more to these different communities and growing them, and you should, if you're interested in any of these topics at all, remember this is all included in a ScriptCamp subscription. All these things that you're looking at right now are just included and are free and public, but if we add longer classes to these things or member-exclusive channels, things like this, you'll be able to access them all through an unlimited subscription. If you check the chat right now, you can find buttons to join all of these different servers. We have a question on Twitch. Just another guy named Harry says, "Oh my god, Connor, you would do this on a Friday night. Don't you know I'm watching X-Files?" What is this, 1999? You can watch X-Files anytime on streaming, my guy. But thanks for stopping by. We hope that you join us at some point. Or on Discord, you can find out a link to join us at scriptcamp.net. And you can use that, and by using that link, you'll join our community, be able to interact with these various classes. You can also leave comments on, like he's done here, on Twitch or YouTube, or Facebook, or any of our other social media that we're streaming on, but it sometimes takes a little while for those comments to show up. We don't always see them. I try to respond to all comments, though, except for the spam ones. So, table reads, 2 p.m. Sundays, 11 a.m. Tuesdays, and we just added this slot Saturday, 2 a.m. Pacific time, so that's international. So hopefully there will always be a time that you can attend or host one of these, submit to one of these readings, either in script form or in prose form. We've just added these live prose readings too. Saturday, 7 p.m. Sunday, 7... this is the same reading so far. So that's that one time slot. Saturday, 7 p.m. So that's tomorrow. You can send a message to me or Nacho if you'd like to sign up for a reading. We have this system of coins that you use. So on the server, if you become a member, you get coins that you can spend on readings. Here's the summary of all the boot camps. TV is today, starting right now, Fridays 6 to 8 for the next 6 weeks. Novel boot camp, October 14th. Feature boot camp, Saturdays 10 to noon. Whew, so much setup, so many things to announce. Nacho, we have to get it's like one of those, it's going to be one of those medicine commercials where it just lists off all the side effects really, really fast at the end of it. So here's the overview of this. Go ahead.
You need to practice your... Hey, and now script camp.
Yeah, my auctioneer voice.
Legal. Yeah, exactly.
Going once, going twice. All right, we have week 1, story engines and log lines. So that's today. We're going to keep filling out the sketchbook, which you ideally were here for and made last week, but if you didn't, you'll be making sketchbook today, and filling that out all this week as you come up with ideas for scenes, moments, characters, lines of dialogue, or anything else that you're going to include in your just general kind of brainstorming document. Next week, you're going to take that and start to shape and organize the scenes and ideas that you have into a coherent structure where you're going to have about a sentence for each scene. And you don't have to have every single scene included, but you're going to be filing and collating and organizing them underneath structural headings so you know what is the purpose of each moment in the story, where are the premise scenes, the midpoint, the act breaks, all the important stuff like that. And then the week after that, you're going to be expanding that into a full paragraph for every scene. So by the end, you're not only going to know what happens throughout the whole movie and have this really clear roadmap through it, but you also will know what happens on every page, or what's supposed to happen on every page. Therefore, you're going to be able to better assess your pacing and whether or not you're taking too long to get through a certain section, or if you're right, on the money. So that's the intention here. We're trying to really, really plot and plan and do perhaps a little more of this than you're used to, just in service of organizing yourself and learning how each piece of this works and fits together, and how does a movie kind of come together one piece at a time. And also just when you start working with other people more and collaborating more, writing things like 1 sheets, 3 sheets, treatments, and outlines for management or production companies or development or any of these other things, then it's really helpful to have the vocabulary to be able to speak in these really, really kind of brass tacks structural terms. So I would try to have some kind of understanding of the language and lingo that we're kind of using here, and to be able to speak to things like, I really think the first act needed those a couple extra pages because of blank. Or you can say something like, I feel that the midpoint raised the stakes because of blank. You just have to kind of have answers to those things and be able to speak in the same language that development and management and people like this will want to use in discussing this very peculiar and particular type of storytelling. We have a question in the chat. Is the thing you list in bullets under each week the homework due that week, or the homework you start doing after class that week? So yeah, that's what you're working on that week and do the following session. Thank you, Nacho. So we go from scene cards to pages. So we say we go to pages, meaning you actually get the screenwriting software of your choice, like Arc Studio Pro, for instance, or like the other many options out there, and you will start actually formatting scenes, writing dialogue, choreographing, blocking, all that kind of stuff. And that is at the halfway mark through the class, so you can be working entirely in Google Docs or whatever, Microsoft Word or something up until then. But the only files we'll be sharing in the classes will be either Google Docs sharing links or PDFs. No, don't be sharing DocX files or stuff along those lines. We have week 4 is first act, week 5 is second act, week 6 is third act, with the first draft completed by November 3rd. All right, overview. So we will start with ground rules and just suggestions for the type of idea or type of movie I would recommend trying to write in this course. We'll look at log lines, time slots, and formats, and also just different genres of TV, which I'm sure you have some understanding of already and maybe an idea of the kind of thing you want to do. We can look at these different formats, continuity formats, like premise pilots versus status quo pilots. And also, we will have that time to post your log lines and to get that early feedback if you need that extra boost. If you need that extra help today, you need some adjustment, or you're not sure if it's working yet, then now would be a good time to start writing and working on those and trying to get that into a good place by at least the halfway point through class, at which point I will say go ahead and post whatever you've got if you need feedback or pointers on it to move to the next stage. So that is going to require you to create your sketchbook if you haven't already done this. So go ahead to Google Docs right now and make a brand new blank document, not another one, but it could be your very first brand new blank document. This is going to be where you're going to keep all of your notes, ideas, and research and questions and basically everything that has to do with the movie that doesn't fit anywhere else. All go in here. I keep saying movie. This is pilot class. Everything that has to do with the show, the pilot. You have a bunch of ideas for what could happen in different episodes, but you don't know which one would be the pilot, which one do you actually start with. Maybe you have a bunch of ideas for characters, but you don't know which of them will actually fit and which ones won't actually fit. So you have to just kind of include everything. There's no right or wrong format for this, but at the top you want to at least start answering these basic questions over here. So fill out at least these things and try to answer these by the end of class if you can. We start with title, genre, title, genre, format, and time slot, comps, series, and pilot loglines, which are two separate things, one of which is going to be expressing what is the show overall generally about, and one expressing what happens just in this very first half hour or full hour of TV. So let's get those sketchbooks up, and I would just have that open and be working on that throughout the rest of class so that you are able to be writing down things you're not sure about or things to remind yourself to ask about, or you can start filling out at least what you have and you can figure out where are those gaps and where are the things that I don't know yet, because those are the things I either need to ask more about or I just need to do more thinking on and figure out the solution to as soon as I can. So make your sketchbooks if you've not yet done so. If you have already made it, you should open it and keep working on it all throughout class. Here's a question in the chat. Do you have advice for making the sketchbook not a disorganized mess, or is yours just a random stream of consciousness and whatever stuff everywhere like mine is? Yeah, there's not really a trick to it as far as I know. It's supposed to sort of be a disorganized mess. You don't really need to ever organize a sketchbook, because when you move into the next stage, or the next deliverable, the next document, then you'll start to sort of draw stuff from the sketchbook and organize it from there. But you don't need to really organize the sketchbook itself unless you really feel that would be helpful for you. It's supposed to kind of be a scratch pad where you just throw everything down. But if you really want to add a little extra structure to it, you could at least divide it into sections. I would have a section for characters. I'd have a section for scene ideas. And I have a section for either research material or like kind of general rules of the world, whether that requires you to look stuff up and do a little research, or whether that requires you to just nail down and learn, specifically, what causes someone to become a ghost or an angel in your script or whatever it is. If those are relevant, then I would just try to divide it into at least those broad sections so you can, kind of sort this mess of information into various topics. Hope that helps. So I've seen some people make like a whole table of contents for their sketchbooks before, though, so ask Carmen if you want to know about that. But no, mine are never actually organized. So you can feel free to follow up on that if you want in the chat, and I can come back to it. So pilot will be finished in 6 weeks. This slide just says, will this be good? No. And it doesn't really matter that it's not. You should look at this as lifting weights or running laps at the gym, and you're not digging for that one treasure chest or thing that's going to get sold or that's going to move your career in any one direction. You're trying to just finish the scripts, do as best as you can, and move on to the next one. There's nothing mystical or transcendent about this. You have to sort of start approaching this like it's work. If you want this to become a job, you have to sort of treat it like this job. Let's look at a couple ground rules. So don't do true stories or anthologies or adaptations, just because these things will all follow different rules and also probably require way more research than you'll have time for within 6 weeks. To that same end, don't do time travel, and probably don't do a historical unless you have a solid grounding in that era or culture already. Just be careful of certain things that are very difficult to get clear on the page, like multiple copies of the same characters, meaning multiverse, clones, parallel universes, or complicated timeline structures where things happen non-chronologically or are intertwined together over the course of the narrative or things like this. So just be really careful with stuff like that and try to pick something relatively straightforward that is a weird, funny idea that's going to just keep you excited and coming back to this for 6 weeks. So the other things are, one, just get used to the idea of sharing work, even at the early stages. After these free couple classes, these are no longer public. These are just for our members, so it's not like they're all going on YouTube or Twitch or whatever. It can be tough to hear big notes at early stages, but this is being a TV writer. Being a TV writer is like 85% being really good at hearing and receiving notes and being able to riff off of these notes and use the useful portions of them and try to be able to assess the flaws in different ideas, and to having a thick skin and just being prepared for everything you throw into the room, having it be torn apart and saying, okay, well, I'll keep trying. I'll keep going next time. So it's not to say that anyone here giving you feedback will be unreasonable about it, but just it is to say that being a TV writer is taking feedback and being a cog in the larger machine until you are at the point where you know how the machine works perfectly. So here's the steps. We start with logline. We're going to move to sketchbook, and you can work on your sketchbook in the logline, so you could put sketchbook first if you really want to. But logline is just this really important first step. It's that kind of seed from which everything else is going to blossom and grow. We then move into story beats, which are, like I mentioned, that kind of broad overview outline of the whole story. We then move into scene cards, which are a full paragraph for every scene with the page numbers on top of each one, so we know exactly where it's supposed to kind of fall, and we can assess the pacing and determine if you're going too fast or too slow. And then finally, we go to pages at the halfway mark. So week 3 for pilot, we start writing the script, and we're going to write an act a week. That will require you to write either 10 pages a week for a half hour or 20 pages a week for a full hour. So that's about 2 pages a day if you're writing half hour, 4 pages if you're writing full. And it sort of incentivizes you to... for some reason, my laptop came unplugged. It incentivizes you to pick a shorter idea. If you're wondering which one should you choose, you have a bunch of different ideas. Then picking the half hour will just be half as many pages. Give me 1 sec to plug this in. There we go. Okay, so yes, if you've got a few competing ideas, then half as much work is just easier to complete in this very condensed sort of time frame. So that would be my recommendation. We have a question: do we post our log lines here in chat, or just work on everything for right now? Yeah. So just for the next half hour or so, you should just be working on your sketchbook. We'll post them at about the halfway mark. Okay, so before we get into log lines, let's talk a little bit about time slot and format, and then we'll move to genre, and then we'll move to story engine. Let's start with time slot and format. So you basically are choosing 30-minute or 60-minute. That means 30 to 34, 35 pages, whatever, for a half hour. 60-minute is 60 to 65 pages. That's pretty strict, and TV is, built to work within time slots and really strict time constrictions, so page counts matter, and careful economic use of your pages is really imperative to learn. You're not going to get it exactly right the first few times, so don't worry about it being perfect in your first several pilots. It's really hard to do, especially even at this high level. Even professionals mess up pilots, or the pilot ends up not really representing the show or not being as good as the rest of the show all the time. There's so many competing interests and different factors that go into this. So all we can do is practice writing the best, most structurally sound, and most effective pilots as we can. So you're going to stick to either these 30-minute or 60-minute time slots. There are other time slots of show that we see sometimes, but largely in terms of portfolios, when you're submitting for staffing, you're going to submit either a half hour or a full hour. So there's just a bunch of examples here of it's really reiterating and hammering the point home. It sort of gives you some more specifics of exactly how long certain shows are. Don't really worry about the 1 page, 1 minute kind of paradigm where 1 page is supposed to be 1 minute of screen time, but that's more or less correct. We don't really have a much better metric than that. So let's look at premise versus status quo. These are called continuity formats, and you kind of, even if you don't have the exact words for this, then you at least know what this is, because we've all seen shows like this. We have a status quo show, which is going to be something like Looney Tunes or the Law and Order, where you can tune in and any episode, and we don't need to have watched the previous ones to know, how did Bugs Bunny get into this situation? We don't need to know the exact overarching plot goals of each character or progression of each character in a procedural, because in a procedural you can open it up on any episode. It's going to be like, here are the detectives, they get another crime to solve this week. There are sometimes changes between seasons of those shows, but they are largely intended to be watched just out of order, randomly. You catch it on TV, on network TV. And you can see why that format was so popular in the world of network TV, where you turn it on and you're lucky if you get the first one, but you really have to make do and make sense of the story as best you can with whatever happens to be on at the time. These are really tricky to write in a lot of ways, and when you're writing the status quo pilot, remember meaning the way things are, so every time the episode resets, then we return to the way things were before. We are always returning to the same baseline every time. We have to kind of deliver a satisfying beginning, middle, and end story that wraps up all the loose ends as best you can, and then sort of says, okay, and next week there will be another story like this one, using these same sort of general tools and playing around in this same world with these same characters, but there are no threads left hanging because we've wrapped everything up. So we shouldn't leave cliffhangers in a status quo format show. That kind of indicates to the audience that this is in fact a premise pilot. A premise pilot being a show which is more like a long story that each episode is just a chapter of. And this pilot has to be both, it has two major objectives. One is being satisfying on its own, so having a strong beginning, middle, and end. and also setting up a much longer journey and much longer trajectories for characters that are going to last theoretically for years and years, up to 10 years or more sometimes for some shows. So you have a lot of different hats to wear and a lot of different plates to spin in writing a pilot, whether you're doing one or whether you're doing the other. But I guess the major difference is that premise pilot is fundamentally an incomplete story in some ways. Like, we have to say the pilot is as complete as it can be, but you have to actually leave some of those questions unanswered, some of those enemies undefeated, and you have to leave things in generally the shape that they would be in moving forward in your show. You can't like completely blow up the premise at the end of a premise pilot, because then we don't know what the show would be now. If you have the whole show, the whole premise pilot is your characters are trying to stop terrorists from launching a nuke, but then at the end of the pilot they launch the nuke and they blow up all of America, and your main characters are the only survivors. Well, that sort of tells us that this first episode was not very representative of what the show ultimately is, which you have to kind of figure out. Is this ultimately a Tom Clancy type Stop the Terrorist show, or is this a Fallout type post-apocalyptic show? And the pilot kind of needs to paint the picture one way or the other. You can't change the premise at the end of a premise pilot, or else you haven't set up that premise. So it can be one thing if the world does change drastically throughout the pilot, but then we kind of need to see then that the whole show is going to be about that change or featuring that change within the pilot itself. Think of your Breaking Bad or things like this, where it's Walt and Jesse are dealing meth by the making meth by the midpoint of the Breaking Bad pilot. I've seen so many pilots that are Walt and Jesse meet at the end, and the whole first episode is all just Walt being sad. And then, so it's the show didn't actually get going, and the pilot needs to act as this sort of trailer or this representative sample of what the rest of the show is supposed to be. So we need to make sure to have the main sort of fun that we're intended to be having throughout the rest of the show in the pilot, and we can't be holding it all back and saying, well, that's coming later. They're eventually going to start making meth and trying to sell it and keeping their personal lives and criminal lives separate. That's in season 3, though. Then what's the season 1? We need to know what is happening. This pilot, has to do this very important job of telling us, here's the main character, here's what they're trying to do, either in a long-term sense or on a weekly basis. This is what the kind of thing that they're always trying to do. And within that, you need to wrap everything up and make sure that we kind of, hit the major beats of that, and we're delivering on the emotional experience that you've promised, no matter if it's premise or status quo, right? If it's supposed to be a horror show, it has scary scenes. If it's a comedy, it's really funny and keeps us watching at every act break, and every act break brings us back in and it sort of compels us to keep returning, because we've used it as this sort of narrative springboard to say that, hey, on the other side of this sort of leap, if you have the faith that you will, give us the simple confidence that you won't change the channel, then our promise to you is that there will be more of what you just saw and more of the emotional experience you just had on the other side of this commercial break, which that is kind of this great, filter of TV shows, is, do people watch past the commercial break or the ad break on Hulu where they show the same car commercial 9 times where you're watching one show? So that's kind of a significant challenge to get someone in an era where we have a phone in our pocket and a million things to watch to actually commit to come back after the commercial break. That's a lot to ask, and we have to earn that attention every step of the way. So a lot of different jobs that you have to fulfill here, and you do have to sort of decide pretty definitively as you move forward. You not right now or anything, but you have to have a sense as you write the show, is this the sort of thing where I'm devoting pages and effort and screen time towards setting up plot elements that won't be able to resolve in this episode? Because if that's the case, and it should sort of be the case for a premise pilot, you need to have some stuff that is held off for later and some antagonists that have not been beaten yet. But if you are holding some things back like that, then you have to make sure we get a really good taste of it. We get a lot of the best stuff in the pilot that made you want to write this in the first place. So try to remember to really deliver on what it is that the show is promising in the pilot. Don't hold things back, especially because 99% of pilots are never, ever, ever, ever going to get made. You're asking to create, a $100 million company that would employ hundreds of people for years. So most of the time, your first couple pilots are not going to get made into shows. So that gives you the freedom to both be a little more creative and weird and try stuff out and write stuff that would be way too expensive to get made. You can do all that when you're just trying to write writing samples like this. And it also just gives you the kind of temptation to say, well, I'm going to have a crazy robot attack in season 2 of episode 6 of this, but I'm not going to do the robots in the pilot because I want to hold off and build anticipation. It's like no one's going to be anticipating season 2 of a show that doesn't exist. So don't hold back. Put the best stuff in the pilot. Okay, genres. So you got to pick 2 of these, or 1, but don't pick a bunch of things or else it will just seem like nonsense. But your options are essentially comedy, drama, crime, sci-fi, fantasy, action-adventure, mystery thriller, and horror, which some people would even lump in with mystery thriller and might even sometimes be lumped in with something like sci-fi in terms of like Stranger Things, right? But today has its own sort of rules and conventions, and there's enough horror TV for us to call this its own separate genre with separate rules at this point. Any of these shows can be defined by 2 of these at the most. I mean, some of them, like the Supernatural one is always the one that starts to confuse people because it's like, okay, this show really is just everything and the kitchen sink. But ultimately, it's a fantasy mystery thriller. And then we have other things that mix together in various different ways. Like you have the, what is it called? The ever-popular crime drama, which we see a million of. Everything from Sons of Anarchy to, what is it we have here? We were talking Breaking Bad, or 24 being an action-adventure thriller, I would say, or maybe action-adventure crime. I guess, terrorism being that kind of thing that sort of almost crosses the boundaries between crime and action-adventure sometimes. Same with Hitmen. It's like, depending on the scale of Hitmen that they are, it might be anything from a crime drama all the way up to an action-adventure type show. And there's nothing wrong at all with just having one single genre. It's not to say that this doesn't sound complex enough if it's just a comedy or just a crime or just something like that. There's nothing wrong at all with choosing just one thing. Just don't pick 3. We have procedural as well, which is kind of like an additional designation. That is to say that usually this will be based in some kind of institution, whether it's emergency services or medical hospital setting or legal setting, something like this. But they are status quo shows for the most part that are intended to always give us the same setup week after week. We have a case of the week or thing of the week. Procedural can be retitled, if you wish, to thing of the week. And then we have animated, which you don't really write an animated show that differently. You are often going to have these be 30-minute and either comedy or action-adventure. But there's enough exceptions nowadays that we have seen kind of everything, but it should just, I don't know, should feel like it should be an animated show. Like, if we read a show and then at the end we're like, oh, that was supposed to be animated? I don't really get why. It might count against you a little bit. Also, they're just incredibly time-consuming and expensive to make, so you should consider how it affects your chances to some degree. But in any case, you can say literally whatever you want is animated, and it would just not really change how you write it. All right. Any questions on what we've talked about so far? So continuity, format, genre, or ground rules? All right, if there's no questions, we will move ahead. So we did continuity format, so you can start filling that out. We did time slot. We did genre. We can talk story engine, and then we will go into logline. So first, I just want to remind you of the things at the top of the sketchbook. Remember, we had title. If you don't have a title today, you don't have to fill it out, but just whatever you have, or like untitled, submarine show or whatever you have. We have genre, which should be 2 things at max. We have format and time slot, which is going to be the time slot being either half hour or full hour, and format being continuity format, being either premise or status quo. Haven't gotten to comps yet, but comps are this show meets that show. So it's sort of telling people what the goals are. Let me bring up my thing on comps. So, and one of them should be a TV show, but the other one could be a movie or could even be a video game or something like that these days. Or you might think of these as the tone or conflict. Well, I would start with the world, actually, though. So let me rearrange that. Let me flip that around. But I'll say the world of X with the tone, style, or approach of the second thing. So let me actually just change that on here just so we don't have any confusion on that. Let me edit this slide. So I'll say world of X with tone /style/approach of Y. So if we have, let's do a crime drama that takes place in, let's say, space. Crime drama in space. Okay. So we have the world of the first thing, the world of space. Let's say Star Trek. And we have the tone or style or genre or approach of the second thing. So we'll say Peaky Blinders. Star Trek meets Peaky Blinders. It's a show about a scrappy up-and-coming gang in outer space. That's not an exact science, and that's not always going to work, but that just is a helpful shorthand if you need. These are kind of dumb sometimes, but like people really do use them in the industry, so try to pick stuff that people will know. If someone doesn't recognize a comp, you don't get to give them a different one, so you just don't earn bonus points for picking stuff that people don't know. But these are just useful to show off the tone you're going for, and to demonstrate and to help clarify for those reading your work if you are meeting your goals or not. If you've picked one of your comps to be a Jackie Chan movie and the other one to be 21 Jump Street, and then you deliver a really serious military action show, we're going to be like, this doesn't match your comps at all. Wait, was this supposed to be funny? So you don't want the audience to be saying, wait, was this supposed to be funny? We want them to be clear on the emotional experience that they are intended to have, and then ideally we are delivering that exactly. So that's why comps are important. And when you pitch loglines today, you will include title, genre, and comps as well, if you have them. If you don't have all of it and you're not ready, that's okay. You can just include whatever you do have. Okay, any question on comps? Here's a hand raised. The Kids Media is this user's name. Feel free to ask your question. So I've invited you to the stage. You'll need to click the green accept button at the top of your screen to speak out loud. Looks like this. If you're on a mobile device, you might need to turn it on its side. And if you're on a computer and still can't find it, you may need to leave and rejoin the room and try again. Otherwise, you can feel free to use the text chat by mousing over the classroom channel and clicking that white word bubble that says Open Chat. All right, Kids Media, I'll come back to you if you're able to accept that invite, or if you're able to ask your question in text. I'm glad to take it. Any other questions on comps, genre, or time slots? Kids Media says, I just came in and want to know about comps. Okay, we just went over the explanation of comps. You can just rewind the stream on YouTube if you want, but just to re-summarize, it's explaining your show in terms of one sort of other existing show meets another one. One of them can be something else besides a show. It could be a movie if you want, but basically you're trying to boil it down to one thing meets one thing. Try not to have 3 or more comps. And you're really using this to clarify the tone and what you're going for in your own show. Hope that helps. Comment in the chat says, I also need help with loglines. Okay, great. We're right about to move to a section on loglines. Let's look at the 2 different types of logline for TV and this question of what is a logline in the first place. And then I will touch on Story Engine afterwards. So we'll start with loglines. The logline is one sentence that expresses what is this about. A movie has one logline, a book or a play has one logline, but TV shows have 2 because we have a logline for the whole show, this theoretical show that you're working on that doesn't exist and probably never will. And then we have the pilot logline just for that first episode, which tells us what is happening just in this one opening hour or half hour of TV. So we're trying to clarify a couple things here. Who is this about? What are they trying to do or accomplish, and what's standing in the way? What's unique about this? What would be the hook of this? The hook being the element that says you may have seen a bunch of shows in this genre, but not one where blank happens. And you have to kind of figure out what that blank is. Whether that's, well, you've never seen one with a detective this crazy before. Oh, wow, okay. Or you've seen lots of cooking shows, but you've never seen... Well, cooking is not a scripted genre, so I'd say you've seen lots of workplace comedies, but you've never seen a workplace comedy set in a volcano. There you go. That's how you kind of can zero in on what your hook is for the show. I don't know what kind of jobs people have in volcanoes, but a volcanologist sitcom, maybe there's something there. So that's kind of the essence of the logline. It's the who's this about? What are they trying to do? And it kind of implicitly answers this question of why are we watching? Why are we interested in this one? Why would people who have seen a bunch of stuff like this come to yours when that other amazing stuff they already know about is already out there? So the kind of formats for these look a little different. The series logline doesn't have a super specific format to it, but the idea is that you're trying to convey the unique world, character, situation, and you want to sort of promise many episodes and make sure it sounds like this would last for theoretically years of show, assuming this is not a limited series. If it's a limited series, then the pilot logline might be enough. But in any case, the series logline goes to clarify the story engine, which is this kind of intangible amalgamation of different ideas and concepts for your script that are going to feel like they could sustain a show for years and create, as we call it, the story engine, because it will fuel or power all the other stories that are to come. And there's not you can't just boil a story engine down to one single sentence, but a really well-written series logline will make it clear, oh, of course, this has to be something that goes on for years, and I can see all the different conflicts and different examples of different episodes that might come up. Those things should bloom in the mind, as we say, as you move past the series logline phase. That should bloom in your own mind so that you will be able to work from that and get enough ideas from that to craft a really compelling pilot. And it will also bloom in the mind of the person that you're trying to get to read or make your show. So a pilot logline is going to be a little bit more like a movie logline. So we have inciting incident. What is the thing that kicks the story off? Who is the main character? What did they want? What's in the way? And what are the walls or scope, time frame, ticking clock, or something else that's just going to contain this and tell us how long is this going to take this character? What time frame are they working with? What happens if they fail? That kind of stuff. So yeah, that's what the story engine is. It's going to sort of fuse your characters, world, and situations to continually generate conflict for years. So having all your characters kind of get along well and they're just happy and they just hang out is not really a strong story engine. A strong story engine is going to be something... Let's think of like the difference between a compelling sitcom story engine and a not very compelling one. If your pitch is just, well, there's a bunch of friends that hang out. It doesn't really sound like there's a compelling replicable conflict there that's going to have interesting dynamics to explore and like different sides of them to see in different ways that can create multiple episodes throughout the years. Think of something like Creepshow, one of the longest running English sitcoms, and just like a really simple basic premise. We have two guys who live together. They were old college roommates. Now they have continued living together long into adulthood. They are sort of best friends and they sort of hate each other. Mark is a super serious, super glum, like nose to the grindstone sort of workaholic, and Jeremy wears the t-shirt. Mark wears the suit, Jeremy wears the t-shirt. They get into conflicts based on that. Mark never pays the rent, Jeremy never is able to pay the rent. I can easily see a bunch of stories happening as a result of that. He's sort of a slacker that just wants to play music at home. Meanwhile, Mark is always working super hard but never getting ahead in life because he doesn't know how to relax. So you can easily see how both of them would have something to offer that the other one's missing, but both of them drive the other one insane because they're sort of complete opposites of each other. And we have a situation, them living together, where they are forced to sort of pit their traits against each other constantly. And I can just imagine a million episodes from the premise of two guys live together, one of them wears the t-shirt all the time, one of them wears a suit all the time. Like just that as the sort of, synecdoche of expressing who they are and how that their dynamic is working. You have the workaholic and the slacker in the same house. I can see the show. The Office was a good example, I thought. So we have Michael as your sort of flawed protagonist with a persistent goal. He's always trying to increase sales and keep the office running smoothly. His incompetence, awkwardness, and desperate need for approval, though, cause problems that have to be solved. So he's not necessarily horrible at what he does. He's not so bad that he would get fired, because that would kind of break the story engine if your main character got fired from a workplace comedy, right? But he has enough flaws, and that's really key for story engines, is character flaws, that will get in his own way and cause conflicts with other people moving forward. We have Jim and Pam as your sort of secondary protagonists. Occasionally, one or the other of them takes the sort of lead A story in an episode. A lot of the time it's Michael, but Jim and Pam are sort of like the tertiary leads here. Their romance really takes center stage in a lot of the show's early big arcs, episodes sort of alternating between Michael and Jim leading out the A stories. And then we have Dwight as the sort of antagonist of the show. I realize he's not always. And as the seasons go on, his role kind of changes a little bit, and how he behaves changes a little bit. But in any case, for the most part, in the first couple seasons, he's sort of jockeying for position and competing with and engaging in prank wars with Jim. So he's sort of head-to-head with Jim, trying to act in this very cutthroat kind of way at the office, despite the fact that Jim really doesn't even love this job and kind of is the audience stand-in who hates all the crap that he has to put up with from his annoying coworkers and is more or less the sort of straight man. So these are just 4 characters, and with just these 4, we can see a really clear engine. It's not one thing. It's all of those things. It's the fact that we have characters that have flaws, that bounce off each other, that have interesting dynamics, where they hate each other, but they need each other, but they're forced or they're stuck together. And the fact is that their personality traits are sort of fine-tuned to constantly push each other's buttons and create funny scenarios over and over again. Any questions on story engines? All right, if there's no questions, I will take last questions on anything we've talked about, including log lines. And then we will just post log lines if you've got them. And when we post, we're going to share. I'm going to post it in the chat just to show you exactly what you're going to include. Title, genre, comps, series logline, and then pilot logline. Okay, so try to have those at the top. If you aren't finished with one of those sections, it's okay, you can leave it blank. But let me take last questions on anything we talked about before we post and share these, and I'm able to give you guys some feedback on those log lines. So feel free to either raise your hand or use the text. What questions do you guys have? We have a question, can we explain comps again? Okay, I could. You can also always just rewind the stream if you need to, but comps are this meets that. So we're taking one show and we're saying it's sort of like this meets this other show. Often you can think of this as the world of the first thing, but with the style, tone, or genre or approach of the second thing. So just pick 2. Try to pick stuff that's going to be pretty well known, not obscure or unknown. And one of them should be a show, but the other one could be a movie or a video game or Broadway musical or something else. That's the gist of it. Any other questions? Here's a question. What if my comps are similar to my pilot episode? Well, they're supposed to sort of be similar to your episode. You think they might be too similar? If it's too similar, you might have to pick just another show that is in the same sort of genre, but is maybe from a couple years before, or is maybe just not the exact same. Like, we don't want your comps to be your exact same story, but just like think of the world and the style, the tone, like those are the important things to nail down. So try to get it close, but not too close. There's not really an exact science to it. Looks like we have a raised hand from Jaime. Feel free to speak on stage. I've invited you.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you. How's it going?
Okay, so character flaws. I didn't really think about it until you explained it. The character flaws in 30-minute comedies seem really seem to contribute to the story engine. Would the same be said for the hour drama, or something else to focus on the hour drama?
Yeah, I think character flaws are equally important for hour-long drama as they are for half-hour comedy, because a lot of the time in a drama, the characters' flaws, they are basically the show. Think of something like Mad Men, where it's like, these are just people doing their jobs and having relationships and going to work and stuff like that, but the ways that those characters are getting in their own way, sabotaging their own relationships and other people's, the way that they are falling to addiction and alcoholism and things like this, all of these flaws are what create the majority of the drama for the show, rather than external forces. So a lot of the time they're even more important, if not, just as important, no matter what genre we're in.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Here's a question from Kev. Should you use different adjectives in the series and pilot loglines? If you can, but if it just is the easiest way to explain it, you don't necessarily have to. You might think of maybe changing the wording in just like tweaking it a tiny bit, maybe in such a way as to evoke some other aspect of the character. Like, for instance, in the series logline, if you explain your character as, like an overprotective mother, but your character doesn't have a kid until the, midpoint of the pilot, you might use the pilot logline and describe them as something like, an overwrought chef or something like that, right? A person can be both of those things, but the point is that it just might make more sense for you to emphasize one aspect of their character over the other in either the series or pilot loglines. But if you can't do that, that's okay. It's not the worst thing ever to use the same wording, at least for part of both. We have a question. If we're finished with the current selection, should we post the stuff now or wait until you ask? We'll do that next, so just wait like 1 minute, and then we will post and share. We have the question, sorry, I meant my comps are similar to my treatment. So the treatment is like a 20-ish page prose written out kind of like really detailed outline. Is that what you mean? I'm not sure how comps could be similar to a treatment as we use the term, but maybe you mean something else, so feel free to clarify if you want. I don't see any other questions at the moment, so let's just go ahead and post what you guys have got. So feel free to share loglines. Make sure to include title, genre, and comps. And you can post either series or pilot or both, whichever one you've got. I'll give you guys a minute or two to do this. And here's just a format you might use for the pilot logline. This doesn't really work as well usually for the series, but for pilot logline, consider when inciting incident, an adjective protagonist must conflict before stakes. So remember one simple sentence as best you can. All right, and I'm going to take these in the order that we get them. So we will start with Kenneth. And then as we're going over this, then you can continue to post your remaining log lines, or anyone else that would like to get feedback today. You will have until the end of the session to do so. All right, let me zoom in actually. Okay, let me invite Kenneth to the stage. Go ahead, Kenneth, and I'll have to ask you questions and give you feedback. Hello.
Yeah.
Can you read out what you've got for us here?
Yes, the title is called Racing Rain. The genre is action-adventure. Comps is Interstellar combined with Mission Impossible and Guardians of the Galaxy. Series logline. After a full frontal assault gone wrong, the sole survivor of the group must put together another group to pull off a sneaky heist to destroy a black hole energy converter. The pilot logline. The attack goes wrong when the galactic government shows up and massacres everyone as part of their plot to destroy the system, leaving Vance to pick up the pieces.
All right, thank you for this. So a couple thoughts right off the bat. This sounds like sci-fi. That's? I mean, we're talking about
Yes.
black holes and stuff like that. Okay, so we have to have that in the genres. So this is sci-fi, action adventure. In terms of comps, you can only pick 2. So you don't have to do it now, but just try to narrow this down and just pick the are they doing heists throughout the whole show or just in the pilot?
It's supposed to be like throughout the whole show. Basically, they're going to be doing heists to get other crew members that are stuck in poor situations to get them to join their team.
Okay, so yeah, pick whichever one you want, but in any case, just try to narrow it down to just 2 comps rather than 3.
Okay.
Alright, series logline. After a full frontal assault gone wrong, the sole survivor of their group. I'm already lost. Which group? Who was assaulting whom?
Okay, yeah. I would say that Vance's original group was assaulting a galactic black hole energy converter on the brink of destruction.
Who's Vance?
Vance is the protagonist.
And he is... So, just like names don't really tell us too much, and no one will remember them, so you have to describe your characters in terms of, like, adjective, noun. And you have to pick those kind of carefully because you can pick different ways to express who somebody is, right? So, in your case, we have to just describe him in terms of, is he, I don't know,
He's a conniving rogue.
Okay, conniving rogue. And when you say rogue, what do you mean exactly? Like a thief?
Yes, he's basically a thief. He's like a professional thief.
Okay, a thief. There we go. Conniving thief. Sure, that works fine. Most thieves, I would say, to some extent, are conniving. So if you can pick something that like is more specific to this character, then that would be better. This is sort of like the first thing that most people would think of, in the same sense of most people would expect like a determined detective, right? Or a protective mother. These things are not always true, but it's more noteworthy when they aren't true than when they are. So just be a little more specific on your adjective. So, a full frontal assault doesn't sound like what a thief would do, though. Wait, so who attacked whom?
So basically, Vance is acting as support to a mercenary group who attacks the black hole energy converter to destroy it. And they are attacking a galactic, basically a piece of galactic property of the galactic government, I would say. So a piece of property from the galactic government, and they're trying to destroy it.
Okay, and why?
Mainly because it's they find out that it is primed to explode within an uncertain amount of time, and they need to get rid of it before it destroys their entire system, their entire solar system.
And that's going to take multiple years of show to do that?
Yes.
It is. Okay. So this is like a multi-season long heist, ultimately, is what you're sort of pitching?
Yes.
Okay. I can sort of see it. It seems a little bit like if you're going to organize a story around a heist, then that should be like the first season rather than the entire... Like, imagine Ocean's 11, but it required years in order for us to get through even one single heist. But I guess is what you're sort of saying is that he's going to be using sort of con man trickery, Ocean's 11 style tactics all throughout in order to accomplish every phase of his plan. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So in that case, I think that we need to emphasize a couple things. So you have your main character, which is this space... I'm just going to call him a space thief for now, because that's all we really have, right? And we have the goal, which is... Is it a heist if you're... Are they trying to steal this thing or destroy it?
It's basically a heist to destroy it. That they're
okay.
They have to take over the entire... Or get complete control in order to destroy it.
Okay.
So I would say, like, yeah.
Okay, so we have a space thief that needs to organize a team to... And when you say a black hole energy converter, what is that? Is that like a space station, or what exactly is that?
Just imagine like a very powerful solar panel that sucks off the energy from a black hole. It's supercharged by like about 10,000 compared to what a regular solar panel would be.
Okay, and it's in space or it's terrestrial?
It's in space.
It is in space.
It's basically right next to the black hole.
Okay, so a space thief needs to, we'll say, organize a team to... Are they trying to... they're trying to essentially destroy a space station that is going to be used as a super weapon, is that right? Or they're worried it's going to cause some kind of massive accident?
Both. It's... basically the government recognizes the flaw and realize that due to political conflict that it would be better off to allow that flaw to happen to destroy the system.
Oh, wow. So they admit it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so in any case, so your space thief needs to organize a team to, let's just say, destroy a space superweapon. I understand that it might be a little bit more complicated than that, but just to be as reductive as possible, right?
Yes.
Before it blows up the... not the galaxy, but the star system where I assume his family lives or something like that. So that's why he's like, I need to save this system in particular? Or does he have more of a connection to it than that?
I would say the system is more... basically, his system is close to where the black hole is. It's not literally like... It's not like planets are rotating around this black hole. It's more of his system is like right next to it. And that's... And if this station blows up, it takes his system with it. So it's basically just two systems, but to narrow it down, it's just I made it just to make it easier to explain. It's just the system. So
okay. So maybe we'll go with something like this. You want to pick an adjective that expresses what is either your character's personal connection to this, or some trait that he's struggling with, or some unique, interesting tactic that he uses, or something like that. So I'm just going to fill this in with some random thing for now. I'm just going to say, let's go with a hot-headed space thief must find and recruit his old heist crew. Or let's maybe say something like must track down his and reunite his old
friends, because his original heist crew kind of gets massacred in the pilot.
Okay, so you can change the specific wording of this. I'm just trying to find a way to or structure the sentence itself. So a hot-headed space thief, whatever, must track down and reunite his old crew to destroy a space superweapon before it blows up the system, or otherwise just express exactly what those stakes are there. Okay, so if I'm starting. Does that, first of all, let me ask, does that sound like the show? Does that sound like I've worded that in a way that makes sense to you?
Yes.
It does. Okay. So clarify main character, make sure we understand why this guy, or why is this guy interesting? What is his connection to what's going on? I understand that tracking down and reuniting a crew could be something that potentially takes years. saying before it blows up the system does sort of make it feel like it's almost a little bit more urgent. So I would recommend maybe instead, do you have a central antagonist?
Oh yes, basically a very loyal mercenary to the galactic government is basically hired on to destroy any dissent before, across the galaxy. And one of his main goals is to make sure that this system stays, or this space station stays, existing until it's primed to go off.
Okay. So in that case, obviously a lot of this won't be workable for you, but just use whatever from this that you can. If you don't phrase it in the logline so much, in the series logline so much as like the urgency of this thing's going to explode, because it's kind of a hop and a skip and a jump for the readers to understand. Oh, but it'll explode in a couple years of show, so we don't have to really worry. I think I would rather it emphasize the antagonist in the series logline. So you would say something like, your alcoholic space thief must track down and reunite his heist crew to destroy a, fanatical Imperial cleric's space laser. Something like that. Just so we're like, oh, that's going to be the antagonist. Like, the story engine starts to clarify a little bit when we start to say, okay, so this is a little like Star Wars, right? Every episode we're going to have a couple different clashes with various forces or plans that were launched at us by this Darth Vader type dude, rather than framing the entire thing around, the urgency of the heist itself, which seems to not actually be that pressingly urgent if we have years to pull it off.
Yes.
Okay, pilot logline. You're kind of throwing us into the middle of things here. The attack goes wrong when the galactic government shows up. So you've kind of given us the effect and then the cause afterwards, which is just kind of confusing right off the bat. So the government massacres everyone. Who's everyone? As part of their plot to destroy the system, leaving Vance to pick up the pieces. Okay, so I would rework this. I would go back to the drawing board on this and just try to get a little more specific, and maybe try more in terms of give us the inciting incident, so the cause, then the effect. So an inciting incident, when, the evil galactic government burns his, his aunt and uncle's moisture farm, for instance.
Yeah.
Burns his boarding school. I know it's not a boarding school. Whatever it is. Then you describe your main character in terms of who he is right now at the beginning. A sheltered farm boy then you'll tell us what is the first objective. So think in terms of uniting his crew. Is there like one person that he needs before he can get anyone else? He needs his old hacker guy. So he must go to a swamp planet, a deadly swamp planet, to find and recruit his team's old hacker. Something like that, and obviously it should be clear how this one thing leads to the next thing. This massacre leads to, now our character realizes what he has to sort of do. So I think it may even be a little bit more like when the inciting incident might be something more like your main character finding out about this super weapon, or it might is like, think of what is the thing that motivates him to actually act. If the massacre might be something that is pushing him forward, but is it the thing that actually demanded the response from him in the first place? Maybe not. So try to find a really clear inciting incident that actually leads to, it's like the last straw that says, this is the thing that's going to be pushing you out of the nest and forcing your main character to find his first team member. And then, or maybe first couple, if you're in your first episode, we want a little bit of a sense of who this is going to be about. So you might want to just clarify who we're meeting.
The original plan for the pilot was he's hired on as a typical mercenary to just support this group while they attack the station, not knowing the full depth of what he's getting into. And when the massacre happens, one of the last remaining members, in a cliche, dying breath, lets him know why they were attacking it and what he must do if he wants to, keep his family alive.
Okay.
Or, keep his people alive.
Okay, in that case, it sounds like your inciting incident is something like when a dying friend warns him of a galactic super weapon, See what I mean? Something like that. It doesn't, like, you have to be a little bit reductive with it, and you can't explain the full context or the full picture of things. So try your best to give us just that sense of what is the thing that kicks him off on this journey, gets this journey moving forward, and then what is the first objective?
Okay.
It's probably recruiting someone, if that's the premise of your whole show, is like, we're building up a team, then episode 1 is probably, we get our first guy.
Yep.
All right, questions?
No questions currently.
All right, I'll paste that second one in the chat too. You can tear those apart and use those as you wish. Thank you so much for volunteering. I hope that was helpful for you.
Thank you.
These are not easy. A lot of people go through many drafts of loglines before they settle on the one that they feel represents what they're trying to make or do. Don't feel like you have to get everything exactly right the first time. All right, we have the rest of the hour. If there's other loglines, I'm glad to look at them or answer any other questions about what we talked about today, writing pilots, writing features, writing novels, or script camp stuff, skill camp stuff in general. Looks like the kids media has posted part of, there's not a logline here, but we have at least a title, genre, and comps. The title is The Group Home. I can paste this in the chat if you want to hear a little more about this. I won't invite you to the stage until your logline is ready, but feel free to let us know what it is, and then I can give you that feedback. Oh, it's a docu-series. Well, we're doing, I hope, do you mean docudrama, or do you mean actual documentary here? Because we're writing scripted pilots in this course, but the comps are The Wire meets Law and Order. Okay, so that sounds a bit like crime drama, if not a procedural. You say you're still working on the loglines. That's okay. All right, so whenever you're ready, let us know, and I can give you more feedback on that. But the comps sound like they work. It sounds like those are two shows that paint the picture of this being a gritty crime procedural in my mind. So if that's what you're going for, then that's working well. I will open the floor to anyone else. Other loglines, questions, whatever you guys need to give you that boost forward to writing your pilot. Feel free to raise a hand now. We have a follow-up in the chat. He or she says, it's a series about the foster care system from a group home girl's point of view, but both of your comps are cop dramas. I'm curious why you chose The Wire and Law and Order in a show about the foster care system from a group home's point of view. There might be better comps to kind of more clearly illustrate what you're going for. I would look into... there's a movie called Short Term 12, which would maybe be a really good comp. And then I would try to find a TV show that sort of feels like it's the world. Because maybe if you're going more dramatic or more funny, there's different comps you might use. Abbott Elementary is a good sort of comedic comp if you're more on the funny side. Maybe other people have some suggestions for other shows that you could use as comps too. But I think The Wire and Law & Order might not be might not be painting the correct picture if that description of your show is what makes the most sense to you. Feel free to ask more questions on that if you need. Cinnamon. Monsters of Mayfair. Shall we do feedback on this?
It's kind of what I had last week. I haven't sort of settled on the story, but it's also, in some ways, it's almost like I feel like I need to do the little beat cards before I make the logline, but yeah.
Okay, that might be the case. How would you like me to just read and give feedback on this like normal, or should we focus specifically on something that you're struggling with?
I think, I don't know, in some ways I feel like I've been thinking about it so much that now my idea seems less clear than last week, even though it says the same.
Mm-hmm.
wrote pretty much the same thing. I think, like, I don't even know what my question is.
Why don't I just read it and we'll see what or why don't you read it for us and then I'll give you feedback on it.
Okay. Well, right. So I have it the same as last week. It needs to be 60 minutes long, and I put my comps as Bridgerton and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. So now I have for the series logline, which is almost the same. The elegant world of Regency London society conceals a secret battle between supernatural beings vying for power. An ostracized family strives... Oh, I'm typoed. To marry or murder their way into power, navigating love, lies, lords, and lethal consequences. And then I have masquerading as a wealthy heiress. A girl arrives in London and works to manipulate her way to becoming the latest flirt of a shape-shifting duke, but he has secrets of his own. And see, then it was like, but that doesn't seem interesting enough, because then I was like, and they need to fight rabid magic wolves. But, yeah.
By the end, they fight rabid magic wolves. Whoa. So,
but I was like, because
go
that's
ahead.
not their goal from the beginning. They just end up fighting rabid magic wolves. So then I wasn't sure, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I feel like it sort of develops into what happened.
Okay. So, yeah, we don't really need to spell out as much where the episode ends up going as much as it is... Like, you could sort of imply what they end up doing if we have a sense of what the goal is in the first place. For instance, well, maybe let's go in order. Let's do one thing at a time. So I'll come back to that in a second. The comps are great. I totally think I see the show from just the comps alone. Bridgerton meets Buffy. It's the world of Bridgerton with the action and supernatural thrills of Buffy, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the tone of Buffy?
I would say, yeah, but also the tone of Bridgerton. I would say a mix of the tone of each.
Okay, well, that sounds fine. But like, comedic though, right?
Yeah, like.
Okay, fine. Yeah, that makes sense. I was gonna say, Buffy gives that very comedic sort of. It has like such a. If you ever comp a Buffy, then you're comping the voice more than anything, which is so specific and it's like so well known. People know exactly what you mean, but you have to just make sure that is what you mean. Otherwise, I would have said you should pick Penny Dreadful. But if Buffy is the actual voice of this that you see, that works great. Okay.
Yeah, I think so, and that goes a lot more with Bridgerton than Penny Dreadful would.
Okay.
To me.
All right. An ostracized family strives to murder their way into Regency, London, aristocracy, right?
Yeah, or it doesn't even have to be a family. Something like that. Yeah, something like that, though.
Oh, well, if you're not sure, I can't make the big level choices for you, but I could at least tell you in terms of the
right. I was
sentence.
Thinking, here's the thing. I was thinking a family is the best way to do it, because, like, that's what it is in Bridgerton. But then it was like, that seems like a lot of characters to try to shove into a pilot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to, like, put a whole family in. So then I was like, maybe it doesn't matter, or maybe, I don't know, the family's just out of town or something. And then I was like, don't you a lot of times want your main character to kind of have to, like, do things on their own? So if they have, like, a whole family behind them, maybe it's less interesting. I don't know.
There's examples of both working well, so I think it's just whatever interests you more. Are you interested in fleshing out a bunch of characters in a big cast? Or are you more interested in just one person's adventures?
I'm more interested in the main character, but I did it because of, like, Bridgerton, where each season is about a different person in the family, because I was sort of trying to, like, I didn't want it to seem like the whole thing was going to be over after one season. You know what I mean?
I see what you mean, but it's just so hard to kind of deliver on the anthological season premise in a pilot. Then I think that the better idea is just to focus on your main character that's going to be doing the stuff. So
yeah, sure. Her family's out of town.
Okay, so I'll just say heroine. Strives to marry and murder her way into Regency London aristocracy, navigating love, lies, lords, and lethal consequences. Okay, great. And then also, I would just ask, is she a vampire hunter? Is she a vampire? Is she a thing? What's her thing?
Right, originally I was just making her boring, but then I realized that she probably needs to be, like, a pretty awesome, like, fighter, or we're going to be pretty bored watching everyone else fight while she's just sitting there. So I think she is... I don't know, I was trying to think of something like a street fighter or a hunter in the woods, like, of animals or something, and she can apply her... I think this world is new to her, but she does have fighting experience for like another reason.
Dang. Okay. Well, that could work. So you're saying she's like a survivalist, or like a what would we even call that in this era? A druid? I don't quite know.
Yeah, I don't know.
So yeah, it's a so in this era in particular, where you come from matters a lot and is going to paint a very different picture of the journey. So I think you don't have to have the answer right now, but just the way that you define the character. If she's, for instance, a formal noblewoman, then this is going to be a very different journey with different challenges than if she starts off as like, forest urchin, because like a forest urchin would have to start from square zero with no connections or anything, but they wouldn't have the baggage of the previous, like that the disgraced noblewoman would have, which would be
my idea is like she finds out or does something to cause like a noblewoman to die, so she's then pretending to be that person. So she's just stealing someone's identity, basically.
Oh, okay. Like in The Riches. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen that, no.
FX show. Might even be not a bad comp if that's the direction you go with it. You should look that up. It was on FX from like 2005 or 6, The Riches. Look it up. Okay, so yeah, you'll just have to make a couple choices on the specifics of the protagonist. Let me look at the pilot logline. So, masquerading as a wealthy heiress, a blank girl, so figuring out exactly what her thing is, arrives in London and manipulates her way to becoming the latest flirt of a shape-shifting duke. But he has secrets of his own, is something that we would sort of assume.
Yeah.
And together they must... That's what we're kind of looking for. So he's a shapeshifter. What does he use his shapeshifting to accomplish?
Well, I decided. So there's like the rabid magic wolves that come attack people for whatever reason, and there's like this big bear that fights the wolves and things, and she's convinced that this guy is the one that turns into the bear, so she like needs to get close to him. But then at the end it turns out she's wrong, and it's actually this other guy that she's been being really mean to that's been turning into the bear the whole time and fighting the wolves, so really she's like wasting all her time.
So the Duke is not even a shapeshifter, or he is? It's okay if you're not sure. You haven't written the story yet, so you can just say, I don't know yet if you need to.
What was the question?
Is the Duke a shapeshifter or no?
No.
No.
In the end, no. But she thinks he is.
Okay. So really, a girl arrives in London and manipulates her way into becoming the flirt of a Duke that she thinks is a shapeshifter, but it turns out he's not. So
right.
Okay. You can do that. You can misdirect us and give us a bit of a lie or trick in the logline if you really need to. But I guess I'm just kind of missing, and you just haven't maybe landed on the answer to this yet. Why is this important? Like, what exactly is the main character? Why is she needed by this guy? Like, how do they end up? If this is in fact the central sort of relationship, you might look into linking them somehow. For instance, like if she's a werewolf hunter and he's a werewolf, there's a clear link and story engine there. Or, for instance, she wants to be a vampire and he's a vampire, right? Or she, like, one of her family members was turned into a vampire and she's trying to find where they are and now she needs his help. Something like that just kind of clarifies why these two together are going to create an interesting show.
Yeah, I wasn't trying to put just them together. I was trying to do multiple possibilities because like in Buffy, she has like 10 different boyfriends.
Sure. But this is at least in terms of the pilot, then we should kind of know, why does she start here? Like, why is this guy the one that she chooses to be the first, I don't even know, victim? Or first, romantic manipulation or something like that?
Yeah. I didn't figure it out. It was something to do with, like, getting closer to power because he had power, or because he was the shapeshifter that she needed help from, or something like that. But I didn't figure it out.
Okay, that's all right. You have a solid week until we do story beats. So this whole week, I would just come up with as many cool set pieces as you can and as many cool out of context sort of scenes, and then ask yourself, how would I possibly arrange these characters in order for us to get those scenes? So think of wouldn't it be cool if there was a zombie masquerade ball or something like that? How could we, get our main characters involved in that? What are they actually going to be doing in the show? And then it should be a little easier to reverse engineer who would they need to be to make this make sense.
Yeah. I figured out my last scene where all the wolves are attacking the ballroom and she's like screaming at this guy to turn into a bear, but he can't.
Right, he literally can't.
Right.
She has the wrong guy. Okay. Well, so yeah, to come up with a bunch of stuff like that, and then this whole week you'll try to make those couple choices of just who are these characters, and why is this partnership the one that the show centers on. And once you have the answer to that, then the rest of it should be able to fall into place easier.
Okay, thanks.
No worries. Any questions on this one?
I don't think so. Yeah, I think I was also going to try to set up a bit of a love triangle in the first one just so we can see how it's going, but yeah, thanks.
No problem. Yeah, if there is a love triangle, it fits very much into this Team Edward, Team Jacob kind of world that you're in. And then you might want to, if that's the centerpiece of the story, you just want to kind of frame the logline around that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for volunteering. All right, we have half an hour left. Does anyone else have a logline they'd like feedback on? If not, we will end early, assuming there's no other questions. I'm going to leave this up on the thing to do for next time. Homework, we could call it. This word, I always used to get so stressed out by homework in school. So why don't we call it something else? We'll call it a fun... We'll call it a mini game, right? Why don't we call it your weekly mini game? Your weekly mini game this week is to finalize your series and pilot loglines if you haven't already done that. You're going to fill out your sketchbook, including some, big scenes that we might call blockbuster moments, which is something I'll talk about more later, but you don't have to worry about now. Just write down all ideas you have for scenes, characters, lines of dialogue, rules of your world, different types of werewolves and vampires, or whatever it is that you've got. Fill out the sketchbook as much as you can this week. Finalize those loglines, and your last, and in some ways most important job is to read a complete professional pilot script from beginning to end. Ideally, you're taking notes and asking questions and writing things down and stuff like that, but even if not, you're at least reading it all the way through and paying attention. You can find a lot of really good TV scripts at this link that I'm going to put in the chat here. You can find them in any genre, UK or US, drama, comedy, all these things. So your goal is to read one. It does not take that long to read a half-hour script especially, so you should be reading 3 scripts a week is what I recommend, but minimum 1. And then during every bootcamp class, we'll just start out by asking, where are you in your project, and what did you read this week? It's not a quiz, there's no right or wrong answers, but we just want to know what you're reading, what you think of it, what you're noticing and learning, things like this. So, one more time, finalize series and pilot loglines, fill out sketchbook, read a pilot. That's the assignments for next week. Any last questions, loglines, or feedback that you guys need before we wrap up? Feel free to ask now. Question from Cinnamon. Are there pilots in the blacklist or only features? The annual blacklist is only features. The blacklist website has pilots on it. So if you make an account and if it's publicly available, you can read some pilots on there. If most of the time the people that get high ratings will not actually have them available, but sometimes they do, or you can send a message to request to read one. So blacklist website and annual list are not actually that connected. They're not directly connected, so try not to get confused there. It's confusing to everybody, but in any case, annual blacklist, features only. We have a poll in the chat. If you'd like to join the bootcamp or have more questions, you can click those little blue numbers to indicate whether you are interested. Here's how to enroll. Thank you, Nacho. Yep, you can go to scriptcamp.net. We have the question, can I finish this up for next class? I guess you mean, can you submit for feedback next class? Sure, if you sign up. We'd be glad to have you for next class. You can do so at scriptcamp.net. If not, we have feedback channels on the server that you can use all throughout the week, and even when there's not a class going on, you can post in there and get feedback from the rest of the community. Here's a question from Cinnamon. For reading pilots, is the best thing to do to look up shows we know of? I would do a mix of both. So I'd maybe even alternate. 1 week you're going to read a few pilots you've seen. 1 week you're going to read either a few pilots you haven't seen or that haven't even gotten made. So I would look at a mix of both. There are a lot to choose from on here. Look at all these seasons. Where to find the ones that aren't made? Need a blacklist account? Question mark. No, you can find on this website that we've linked here. You can find a bunch that haven't been produced. Basically, just look from one a couple years ago, search for the title of the show, and if you can't find it, then it never got made or hasn't yet. Lots of choices. Hope that you'll find one that you enjoy. Even if you don't, you should still finish it. Still finish at least one script by next time. Okay, if there's no more questions, and if there's no more logline material to look at, we will wrap up for today. Thank you guys so much for coming to this new session. We really always enjoy seeing all the great stuff you guys come up with, so looking forward to seeing you for the rest of either this boot camp, which will be continuing in the same time slot, Fridays 6 to 8 for the next 5 weeks, or we have these many other boot camps that have just gotten started or that are starting soon. We'd be glad to see you guys for as well. Hope to see you soon for your next script camp, class, workshop, or event. And have a great rest of your weekend.